Okay, you guys. There was one person that did request my story. Well, I have two stories. See how long this first one takes. Then I might do the second one. Um, when I was 16, I no longer wanted to go trick or trick or treating because I didn't like it to begin with. I never did. Um, I've never been much for Halloween. I People have always scared me since I was little. I don't like it. Um, so as a punishment, my parents did not allow me to go to my grandparents' house, which my grandparents offered for me to go to their house to help them give out the candy. Mind you, my grandparents were quite old by this time. And my aunt was at work, and my stepdad, Steve, um, said that his youngest daughter was going to show up with her son, which of course she never showed up. Um, but he took off early. But him and my mom both said that it was a punishment. That if I didn't want to go trick or treating that year, then I'd have to stay at home on Halloween night and give it out the candy by myself. I was not allowed to talk on the phone to anybody. I was not allowed to go anywhere unless I had their permission. So they had cable in the front room. I started watching the Roseanne Halloween um, show. They had all the shows on. So my mom had decided to go and take my brother and his friends trick or treating. My mom and Steve both would not be back till about 1 o'clock in the morning. So she took off with them and left me to finish doing the Halloween cookies. So I started fixing them in the oven. She had a total of six batches that were left, and I had to do all six. But anyway, the back door was shut and locked, and the front door across the street from us was this kind of a small yellow house, and these people that lived there, they had a friend of theirs, and I don't know who he was, and I don't want to know who he was, but he obviously got his kicks off by scaring people. Not sure what he intended to do with me, or if he was just trying to scare me or what. But started out that he came outside dressed as a werewolf, and it was a really good one because it looked real. I mean, very, very real. And he was standing on the side of the fence where the house is, the little yellow house. He was scaring the kids when he started to stare at me. Now, I had my front door open, the inside door, but the outside door stayed locked, but I could unlock it when the kids would come up so I could give out the candy. Well, he kept staring at me, and I kept going back and forth to get the cookies out of the oven, but eventually he was standing on the sidewalk when he wasn't scaring the kids. He was staring at me, and this went on for quite a few hours. And he stood in um right smack in the middle of the road and started just staring at me. And he had to have known he was scaring me. Well, I got kind of freaked out, and my grandmother had called by this time. And I told my grandmother what was going on. And she said, okay, well, I'll call your aunt at work and let her know what's going on. And I told my grandmother why I couldn't come over, and she said, "Well, I'll talk to your mom," but she couldn't because she couldn't get hold of her. This was back in the days before pagers. I mean, there were kind of, but not really. Before cell phones or tablets or any of the above. So I got off the phone to her, and she called my aunt at work, and while this was going on, I was taking the last batch of cookies out, and when I come back in to give out the candy, he was standing on the leaning up against the tree, which was right across from my house, in this little grassy area before you got to the sidewalk towards my house, right on the same side as my house was. So that started freaking me out because he started to get closer to me, and I kept giving out the candy, and he kept scaring the kids. After about 40 minutes, I noticed that he wasn't leaning up against the tree anymore. He was standing on my sidewalk now. And he was just staring at me. He was scaring the kids every once in a while, but mostly he was just staring at me. He eventually started scaring the kids more often. But after about a half hour, he had gotten up toward this little grassy area that had bricks, which was a path that was on my property. And he was just standing there, just staring at me. I didn't like it at all. He then moved to where the where my driveway is, and he was about halfway up, but I could still see him. And about that time, my grandmother had called me and told me that my aunt was going to try and get out of work a little bit early, so to make sure to be ready, because she was going to pick me up whether my parents liked it or not and bring me over so I wouldn't have to be there all by myself. Because mind you, by this time it was after 7:30 at night. I said, okay. So I talked to her for a couple minutes, went and got my stuff. Took me maybe 15 minutes. And when I came back, because there were a couple of kids that were trick-or-treating still, that I had known in the, around the neighborhood that lived like 3 houses down from me, by this time he had come up on, he was standing at the bottom of the stairs of my porch. And he wouldn't say anything, but he would stand there and he would stare at me. Well, after that, about that time just before my grandmother called, one of the kids said, "Can we come in and go out the back door?" Because the guy was scaring them. So I did, and I made sure that the back door was shut and locked. When I come back in, the phone rang, and it was my grandmother, and I told her what was going on. And by that time, he'd made it up to my porch. I was standing face to face with him. The only thing that was between us was the outside door that was locked. And I told her to just listen to what I was saying. And I told her, I said, when you get off the phone to me, call the cops and let them know what's going on. And that seemed to work. He didn't get off my property, but he went back down and stood at the bottom of my driveway, and he stayed there the whole time. So my grandmother let me go, and she called my aunt. My aunt left work, came over and got me, and when my aunt pulled up, he was still standing at the end of my driveway. My aunt got out of the car with her baseball bat, and he just sort of stood there and just stared at her. She just looked at him. Went in, and we grabbed the bags, put them in the back seat, and when I noticed, and I made sure that the whole house was all locked up, lights were out, and everything. When her and I got in the car, we noticed he wasn't there anymore. He had taken off. There was no lights on in the house across the street. He was nowhere to be seen. We went around the block 3 times and couldn't find him. So we went to my grandparents' house, and my aunt said that she was going to call my mom when we got there. By the time we got there, it was a little after. It was like 8:45 or something like that. And I told her not to because I knew that they would turn around and make me go home. And she said, no, they're not going to do that. Well, she finally got a hold of my mom through her pager. My mom had to call her, and she was angry at first until Rhoda told her about it. But Rhoda, I don't know why, but my mom, she never really believed me. She never really believed either one of us, Nick and Steve. I ended up staying away for the rest of the weekend and staying with my aunt because they both wanted, or well, Steve in particular wanted me to come home. He was going to punish me. That wasn't my fault, and my aunt could vouch for it. He was there when she pulled up. I don't know what they were thinking, leaving a 16-year-old girl like that on Halloween night, alone like that. Not very smart. After that, I spent Halloween with my grandparents along with Devil's Night. Now I spend it with my roommate, which is my aunt. Alright, so there's still some time left, so I'm gonna that was the first story. The second story happened when I was about 23. I was living with my parents off and on. And my aunt had gotten out of work late one night, and my parents were working the put the newspapers in those little bins. So you have to unlock them and lock them back up. And they'd been gone until between 5:30 and 6 a.m. And so I was told I had to come home by myself. And at the time my aunt got back to pick me up to take me home, it was it was literally pretty close to about, I want to say 12:50 at night. So she took me home, and there was a car that had these 3 guys in it on my street. This was a different house, by the way. But they were following us, and Rhoda, she dropped me off. I went in the house and locked it up. She took off, and they took off and came back around, and I went out to get a glass of milk, and the back lights came on all of a sudden, and this guy come up, and he saw me, and he literally stood there. Right, because by the time I got home, it was after 1 o'clock in the morning, and this guy just stood there, turned around, got back in his car, and took off. Now I called my aunt, and I didn't know that she was going to go to my grandmother's house. She didn't tell me. So she didn't get the message. I ended up leaving her a message on her house phone to come and get me. And about that time, my mom called to see if I was at home. I told her what was going on. They come over, and both of them really didn't believe me. And Steve stayed in the house with me while my mom went across the street. And she went across the street, and the 2 people across the street were standing right there in front of their living room picture window. They saw the whole thing. And according to Steve, he said, well, he was probably just going to ask me for directions. At almost 1:30 in the morning, I don't think so. Well, he decided to go across the street where my mom was. And I don't know why, but they both didn't believe me. So he went over and was talking to them outside. So I called my aunt and left another message let her know that I wanted to come back over here because I didn't want to stay there, and about what Steve had said about how the guy just wanted he was just asking for directions at almost 1:30 in the morning. I don't think so. I think he lost his mind. So, well, soon after, my aunt called and she let my mom hear the message by accident, and my mom called me a liar, and I said, why don't you go out there and ask him? Sure enough, he said, oh, yes, I did. That's exactly what I told her. And she said, well, you don't know that. You don't know what it was he wanted anyway. Well, I told them that when Rhoda got here, I was going to leave with her and come back here. And they said, no, you're not. You have to stay here at home by yourself. Rhoda can stay with you for an hour, but then you have to stay here the rest of the night by yourself. So I waited until after they left. They left me there alone before Rhoda got there. And so I didn't know this at the time, but Rhoda could see them. Their car was sitting out there. They were waiting to see if her and I were going to leave. So we waited a half an hour, 35 minutes, and when we looked, the car was gone. So I just got some extra stuff and took off, and first went to my grandparents, and then came back over here. And they never knew the difference when they came in. They were so tired, they went upstairs to bed, and they just thought that I left early in the morning. But the moral of it is that my parents were just being crazy people, basically. Thank you for listening, and if you want to hear more of these stories later on, let me know. And make sure on those notifications, if you're on your cell phone or your tablet, make sure you turn on those notifications. Sometimes you have to turn them on manually so you can get notified of all my new upcoming videos. And thank you to the one person who said that he or she wanted a story. And thank you. And I hope you guys have a great night and have a safe and happy Halloween. And be safe. Okay? Bye.